My name is Peter and I'm an alcoholic. I've had some experience with these steps the way they're laid out in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous with the help of my Big Book Step Study sponsor, a loving God who was revealed to me through this process, and people in rooms like this. I'm currently making my 9th step amends, and I practice steps 10, 11, and 12 on a daily basis. I want to thank Joe for asking me to speak. The first time I've been to this meeting here in Worcester, and had a nice ride down this morning. It was a great opportunity for me to be reminded again not to trust and rely on myself, but to trust and rely on God, because I was always worried about being late, and because not that being late was really bad, but because I was so terrified of what you folks would think of me if I was, okay? I mean, just terrified. So coming down, I said, just enjoy the ride. It's beautiful. It's like, come on, you gotta turn this over. And I did, and I kept saying over and over again, I need to trust and rely, I want to trust and rely on God. And it worked. Of course, then when I went to get my big book, it was in my bag with my water bottle, and I guess I hadn't thought that out too carefully, so my big book is a little damp right now. So, but that's okay. I'm just so glad to be here with all of you. I'm going to briefly qualify, just tell you how I got to Big Book Step Study. Back in high school, when I started drinking when I was around 13, and I was always the kind of kid who never felt I fit in or that I belonged. I always felt that I was less than, I wasn't good enough, but yet I certainly I was terrified that anyone would see that. And so when I found alcohol, that was the elixir. That made me feel exactly how I wanted to feel. And I thought, I found the solution. This is it. This is all I need. And that solution continued to work for a long time. But looking back on it too, even the guys I drank with in high school, I remember now, were worried about me and about my drinking. These are guys I drank with. And they were saying, well, we think you drink too much. And then I said, well, what do you mean? I don't drink enough. But that was all explained to me later, where that was all coming from. But so I did, and I continued to drink, and I always functioned. I was always employed. I always had a job. I always paid the bills, and so that on the outside everything looked fine, because it was so important for me that everything looked good to all of you. And so I reached a point in 1982. It's my first exposure, my first time I came into AA. And I came into AA, at that point I was suicidal. I was in really bad shape. I came into AA, and of course I grew up in a small town in New Hampshire. And of course I assumed nobody knew that I drank. And so when I got to AA and I walked in, and first person I saw was someone who had worked with my dad years ago, and he said, Peter, is that you? And I said, yeah, Lenny, I think I've changed a little bit, since you knew me as a kid. And then the other person I saw, I drank with his son, and then my friend David was killed, and he, drove off the road in an alcoholic blackout into a tree, and, with some astronomical blood alcohol level. And so I met Dan, his father, at AA, and I remember asking Dan, I said, do you think I'm an alcoholic? And he just looked at me and he said, well, you'll do until one comes along. And that was exactly what I needed to hear, because then I stuck around. And I did, I had 2 good sponsors during that time. I was sober for approximately 18 years. I say sober, I was not drinking for 18 years. I went to meetings, I got active, I made coffee, I did everything I thought I was supposed to do according to what I understood. And I look back on it now, and of course the only thing that I was doing is I wasn't drinking. And Joe and I were talking about it before the meeting, our meeting before the meeting, and and how that, I mean, I realized I was so fearful, so full of fear. I was so enraged. I was so angry. I was so, you know, my need to control my life, and I was just in this constant turmoil. And I realized that, you know, I was, like it says in the big book, I was one of those who was, you know, restless, irritable, and discontented. And I was like that all the time, except now I wasn't medicating myself. You know, and so I was out of my mind. I really was. But boy, I didn't want you to see it, you know, because my feeling was that I kind of knew I was crazy, but I figured really crazy people don't know they're crazy. So as long as I knew I was okay, you know, as long as I knew it, I was okay. But if I stopped, then but no one ever, and this is my original big book that I got back then. And again, we were talking, and I read it a lot of times. And I would go to a 12 and 12 every week without fail. And I thought I was doing the steps. You know. And so, again, in retrospect, so much of it is from where I am right now. I can look back, is that I was dealing all that time with untreated alcoholism. Okay? The only thing I just removed the alcohol, because I thought that was the problem. Well, the problem was I didn't have enough, you know, or the other problem is that I didn't have the control, I didn't have the power, I didn't have the ability to drink the way I wanted to. Mm-hmm. And so, after 18 years, again, it talks about, I mean, there was a point where I had absolutely no defense. I experienced one of those mental blank spots. I had just graduated. I'd gone back to school. I'd gotten my degree. I'd started years before. I had a great job, great marriage, everything. Everything was good. Everything was going great. And out of nowhere, now I can tell you what happened, but I couldn't tell you why it happened. Out of nowhere, the thought came to me, you know what would be really nice? We'd have a drink. And it was like, and without hesitation, without a blink, yeah, great idea. You know, I mean, that's the insanity for me. I look at it right there, that's it in a nutshell. It's like I had everything to lose. You know, and an old timer years ago, where I grew up in Peterborough, he'd been in the Merchant Marine, and he would come into Boston from into port, and he would stay at the Washingtonian Hotel for male inebriates. That's what it was called. And George was a great guy, and he always said this is the biggest con ever to come down the pike. He said alcohol will promise you everything, and it will take absolutely everything you've got. And so there I was, you know, so a good alcoholic. Well, I'll have a couple. And of course I had been a binge drinker through most of my drinking. Only because I aspired to be a daily drinker. Because again, my insanity told me that if I could be a daily drinker, it would all level out. You know, but because I could only drink when it was safe, and where no one would see or no one would find out, or, you know, of course, I always had a great way of drinking at the worst possible times. And that's where the coming late all the time comes in, because of course I'd be getting primed on my way somewhere to make sure, because I knew they'd already started, so I just didn't want to be behind. And so I stayed out for another 10 years. And again, every time I would drink, there was always that voice saying, "You really think this is a good idea? But again, the insanity, my disease told me, you've been sober longer than you drank. You're going to be okay. You can handle this." And I wanted to believe that. Because, again, I didn't understand. After all those years, I didn't understand that I had a physical allergy to alcohol, that I had a mental obsession with alcohol, and that I had the phenomenon of craving. And that I had been living with those things, and that, of course, once that phenomenon was triggered, and once I drank, all bets were off. I mean, I thought I had control. That was the biggest con, is I thought I had control, you know, and I tried so hard. you know. And so after almost about 10 years, and my wife said to me one day, because things that I started drinking over the years, you know, I hit it really well. Really well. I was good at that. Had a lot of experience. I knew exactly. So, you know, I had a great job and I could travel, stay at really nice hotels with an expense account and, you know, drink top shelf, and that was better, right? So I came, my wife said to me one day, when she realized that, you know, I mean, I was starting to drink at home, and she said, you need to do something. And I knew exactly where I needed to come. But boy, that was tough. That was tough. You know, don't anyone ever tell you if you're coming back, it's not that hard. It's really hard. It's really hard. I came back, I was absolutely shaken. I came back, I think I'd been sober for a couple of days, and I went to a meeting in Keene, and there was a gentleman who was a greeter, and he's been around for quite a while, and he was celebrating his anniversary that night. And he was celebrating 28 years. And I'm sitting there doing the math on my fingers and realized, of course, if I'd stuck it out, I'd be the same number. And I was like, son of a gun. And then the next thought that came was, you better let that thought go. That ship sailed a long time ago, Pat, you know? So I said, oh, yeah, I guess so. There's nothing I can do about that. So the next night I was at another meeting, and they were giving out, because the first one they were giving out chips. It's like, oh, no. I'm not ready to get up and get a 24-hour chip or a 1 to 29 or whatever. The next night they were doing it, that meeting they were doing it also. And what came to me, I thought, was that you have to get up and get this chip. You have to get this, like from 1 day to 29, whatever, I forget what it was now. You have to do this or you will drink again. And so I thought I have to admit to myself and to everybody here that I'm Pete, I'm an alcoholic, and I'm back. And so I was back, I did that. And then for 2 years, I've been back just over 4 years in November. I got a sponsor because he's a nice guy and he rode a motorcycle, so, you know. But he had long-term sobriety, and he kind of fit the profile and had his own business, fit the profile of my previous sponsors, okay? And what I didn't realize till later on is I asked him if he'd help me with the steps, and he said, oh, sure. But basically I was doing it Peter's way. You know, I wasn't in Alcoholics Anonymous, I was in Peter's Anonymous. I was doing this exactly as I had done it before. You know, I was just skimming along the surface, just coasting, you know, and from before, all that time of just living on yesterday's sobriety in that first period, the first 18 years, just living on yesterday's sobriety and just coasting along. And so, you know, when I was doing my fourth step with him, my way, there I am with my spreadsheet on the computer. I can get this off. I'll have this knocked out in no time, you know? So I read it, and I read my fifth step with him several months later, and nothing. Well, it says something's supposed to happen. I'm supposed to feel a little better. It's supposed to be something here. Well, so then I had heard about these other meetings. Big Book Step Study, and I heard, you know, they won't let you speak unless you've done it this way. I said, son of a bitch. Why wouldn't they want to hear me? Okay? Well, again, I can laugh at it now, but I have, you know, so much to offer. And I'm thinking, but as I look back on it now, of course, that first 18 years and the 10 years out and the 2 years back, I had nothing. I had nothing to offer you. I could tell you how it was, you know, and what, you know, everything. I can tell you what had happened, but that was it. I had nothing to offer you or offer in terms of a message or a solution. And so I finally said, okay, I'll go and I'll check this out. Because again, I realize now, when talking about this whole higher power thing, you know, because I was one of these agnostics, and that they talked about in the reading today, and that the whole thing is that trying to think, I just lost my train of thought. I'll catch it at the next station. But I said, I'm going to try it out, because what came to me, this thought, and again, I realized that this is all guided. It said, just go and listen. You need to go and sit and be quiet and listen, because you don't know. You've got to hear, you need to hear, you need to listen for the answer. And so I went to the meeting, and I introduced myself. I'm just here listening, you know, when we went around, just here listening. Did that for several months. And I saw a man in that meeting that talks about in the big book, whose whole deportment shouted that he had an answer. And I said, yeah. And so I asked him if he would sponsor me, and he said he'd be honored to. And so I continued to I started to do the work with him, and thank goodness I didn't know at the time what I had agreed to do. Not scaring anybody off here. It's all good. It's all good. It's so worth it. And so here I am. I spent over a year doing my fourth step. Well, let's just go back a couple, because we're on step 2 tonight. And so this morning. And so when I did that with him, and this is where it comes into step 2 for me, is that I mean, I knew I was powerless over alcohol. I mean, that's, you know, I'm no fool. You know, I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer, but I figured that out, that I'm powerless over alcohol, because every time, you know, I always never got into trouble every time I drank, but every time you know what I mean. Yeah, it was trouble. And well, whenever I got into trouble, there was alcohol. And so I knew that, and as far as my life being unmanageable, that was something that's kind of tough, because I'd grown up with the adage, you know, that, you know, you get yourself into this, you just get yourself out. And you basically were self-sufficient, you took care of yourself, you did what you needed to do, and you didn't ask for help. And so we got to step 2 in our reading, and what again, with the reading today, what keeps coming to me is the word willing and willingness in this reading over and over again. And fortunately, when he asked me, he said, are you know, do you believe in a power greater than yourselves could restore you to sanity, or are you willing to believe? Well, the willing thing I could do, because I was one of these agnostics. I believed that my higher power, my God, whatever, the God of my parents, had abandoned me a long time ago. Well, in retrospect, it hadn't. I was the one who had abandoned my higher power. I do believe, as talks in the reading today, about that at the core of every person, every man, woman, and child, that there is the basic, there's that light. I think we all have that light within us, okay? And for me, this is something that's returned to my power greater than myself, my higher power. I don't know what it is or who it is. I just know that I believe that this is something that I've been striving for most of my life, to get back to this. This was something that was fundamentally missing in my core, in my very center. And so when I did that with him, I was willing. And then, again, not to get too far along, but then it talks about in the spiritual experience in the appendix in the back of the book, and I love that, because I was one of those who really misunderstood, surprise, you know, misunderstood the whole idea of the spiritual experience. And for me, it has been one of the educational variety, and it continues to happen. And it started when I did my third step with my sponsor. And I was kneeling in a church upstairs in another room, and we did the third step prayer, and something happened. And I kind of joked about it and said, well, you know, it's like a ripple in the matrix. Something shifted. I felt it. I got emotional. felt it, and I said, what the heck's this? But then as I was doing my work, my writing, and I was, and that's heavy-duty stuff, to reveal all of this, bring it out. But then it kept happening. I found I would have this, because I would bring this, ask my higher power to come and into my writing. Even though at first, I'll do it because I'm told I should do it, and so I'm just going to follow directions, that's another big one for me. Okay, I'm one of those people who do not follow directions well, and I don't play well with others. Okay, and so I was doing this as I was instructed to do, because I didn't know any different. I had nothing. I'd asked for his help, and I promised him that I would finish this work, but thank goodness I did make that promise, and that I would carry this message when I could, and help another man through it if asked. And so, thank goodness, with the willingness, and that's all I needed, was that willingness. That talks about it again, the big word, the key of willingness. That's it. All I needed. I didn't need to believe anything more or anything beyond that. And then it talks about the spiritual experience, and this again is so great, because I love this. It says, upon careful reading, shows the spiritual experience, the spiritual awakening, that the personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism. Well, that's what I want, is that recovery from alcoholism. And that all it means is I just have a personality change sufficient. Gee, I could probably do that. I bet that could happen. And the amazing thing is, it has happened. It has happened as a result of this work. And it surprised the heck out of me. Really did. It has really, and it continues to surprise me every day. I'd be careful, I get emotional. I don't be careful, I just, I got to keep it together, man. And it does happen every day. But during that writing, and particularly my fear inventory. Oh my God. Oh my God. You notice how I use that word so easily now? It was, that's where it was like spiritual surgery. It really was. It just really, I have had such a profound change in my life. And why I can tell you that is because my wife told me. No, she's not, and she's my mirror. She will tell me, she calls me on stuff, and thank goodness she does. But when she said, you've changed, and she said, you're the person I always knew you were. And she said, I look in your eyes now, and I'm not afraid of you anymore. Okay, I was never physically abused. I could be verbally sharp and abusive. Yeah, I have to admit that. Very critical. Very, oh God, but for her, and so for her to share that with me, and I know that this change has occurred, this personality change, because I feel it. I feel it every day. I just feel it. I invite my higher power into my life every day, and because I've realized, I can't do this alone. And so when I'm asked to come and speak at a meeting like this, although it's funny, since I've been back in AA, and particularly since I finished my writing and everything last fall, I said, I don't really want to speak. I really don't. I just quietly sit in the back of the room and listen, and that'll be good. That'll be great. This is the third meeting I've been asked to speak to this week. The other two were spontaneous. They were not planned. They were just the night before the one meeting, and I walked in the door of the other meeting on Thursday night and was, oh yeah, Pete's going to speak tonight. And so obviously, and I've shared that, obviously I'm getting exactly what I need. So I am so grateful to be here, and so grateful for you and your patience and with me, and that for me, just the willingness just to remain willing and to remain teachable, to be able to just say, I don't know, I don't have all the answers. And you know, if you're thinking of doing this work, please do yourself. It's so amazing. It's so incredible. You know, I was big a skeptic when I came in here about doing this, and I just, you know, to see someone else to do this is such an amazing thing. And I want to thank you all and bless you.
Nice.